I'm Betsy DeWitt, president of the Nonpartisan League, whose mission is to educate voters and to encourage election turnout. For this June 9th election to be successful, the town urgently needs poll workers. If you can help, please contact the town clerk's office for information. We're pleased to have the Town Meeting Members Association as our partner, and Arthur Conquest will speak in a moment, the president. Our forum host will be Ernie Fry. It's time to change the slide. Lee Cook Childs will be our timekeeper. And behind the scenes, our invisible and invaluable Zoom administrator is Catherine Florio, assisted by Sue McCallie and Ann Theus, who's program director at Brookline Interactive Group. Big will be broadcasting the forum. Only the candidates for townwide office will be with us today. And first, each candidate will make comments, or if the candidate cannot be present, the host will read a statement, and then the host will read questions from the audience for candidates to respond. Please, next slide, write your questions in the chat, for which there is a symbol at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please remember to hit save in order for your questions to be recorded on chat. And now I welcome Town Meeting Members Association President Arthur Conquest to share hosting with me and other members of the league. Arthur, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just have to unmute myself, sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Betsy. My name is Arthur Wellington Conquest III. I'm the president of the Town Meeting Members Association and also a town meeting member from Precinct 6. I want to welcome the participants and those of you who are in our viewing audience. Quickly allow me to mention the other members of the Town Meeting Members Association Executive Committee. George Abbott White is the Vice President. Corresponding Secretary is Harry Friedman. Ernest Frey is the Recording Secretary. And Susan F. Cohen is the organization's Treasurer. The purpose of the Town Meeting Members Association are as follows. 1, to serve all town meeting members as a nonpartisan, non-advocacy-based association. 2, to foster open, efficient, and effective participatory and democratic governance in the town of Brookline, and to increase the understanding of town meeting members and their constituents of issues facing Brookline, which may come before town meeting. 3, to gather, develop, and disseminate relevant information about town issues on town meeting, to town meeting members and their constituents for the purpose of providing an informed discussion of issues at town meeting. 4, to consider ways to improve the structure and process of town meeting, its efficiency, collegiality, and effectiveness to encourage broad participation of town meeting members. I thank everyone for their cooperation and undivided attention, and good luck to all. I would like to now turn the program back over to Ernie Frey.
Thank you, Arthur. We are we're going to begin this afternoon's presentation talking about the Housing Authority, for which there is one candidate running for a single seat. Barbara Dugan is a 30-year member of the Housing Authority and has served in most of its offices, including chair and treasurer. Unable to attend today's forum, she is unopposed for this 5-year term. The next race we will consider is for library trustee, for which there are 4 candidates, all incumbents, running for 4 seats. 3 of the candidates, Chris Shanya-Sulkit, Gary Jones, and Karen Livingston, are unable to be present today due to recent surgeries, but 2 have submitted statements. Here is the statement prepared by Chris Shanya-Sulkit. Hi, my name is Chris Shanya-Sulkit, and I'm running again for re-election as a library trustee, as I loved my first term volunteering for our town and have always loved our libraries. Due to a medical emergency this spring, I am sorry that I cannot be here for this forum, and thank the LWVB and the TMMA as co-sponsors and big for this important program. As the daughter of Thai Chinese immigrants who grew up reading Nancy Drew mysteries in my local library while my mom rested from her long days, nights of work, I know how important our library resources are to families, and especially families of color. The kind and helpful staff, the free English language programs, laptop lending, books, magazines, professional development programs, tax preparation services, story times in multiple languages, movies, and so much more are a real game changer for families. In my term, I feel that I accomplished a lot, but there is more to do. I am especially proud of trying to offer community ideas for programs and services to our staff, and likewise to try to share the many library offerings with our community. Now during the pandemic, it's harder as our doors are physically closed. Thankfully, we have many virtual offerings like virtual story times and even online chat functions where you can ask questions directly to our incredible library staff. As difficult financial decisions will need to be made, I am hopeful that as patrons realize the importance of our libraries, they will continue to advocate and support our libraries, which are open to all. Thank you, and stay healthy and safe. We also have a statement from Gary Jones, and this is what he has offered to you all. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and the TMMA for holding this candidates forum. Also, thank you for letting me make this written statement. I've been recovering from recent heart surgery at home. This is a difficult time for the world. Our 3 public libraries are closed since mid-March. My mentor as a young man was Myrtie Whitbeck, town librarian in Middleborough, Mass. She encouraged me to think about going to college. I feel blessed to have been able to serve as a library trustee here in Brookline. Any library opens doors to the world of history, facts, biography, and imagination. I appreciate the opportunity to be a small part of our library system. 60 years ago, Ray Bradbury's dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451, predicted a bleak future where firemen were charged with burning books and seeking out and destroying private libraries. Television supplied the entertainment to keep the people distracted from reality and history. Now we have Brookline's firefighters staying in the main library in Brookline Village in order to maintain safe distances from each other during this pandemic. I envy them their access to our whole library of books and material. It's an oasis in a time of confusion and lack of truth. Our present moment reminds me of Bradbury's novel. The internet and social media encourages people to vent their rage and lies about a whole range of topics from history to politics without regard to the truth. Our libraries are one of the few remaining places that carry forward the culture and facts of our civilization. Thanks to the influence of Ms. Whitbeck, I graduated with a BBA from the University of Notre Dame and later 2 master's degrees from Harvard. I served as a school teacher in Boston, state representative from Plymouth County, and later a senior researcher for the Mass House of Representatives. I'm married to Marcia Salter Jones. We have 3 children, 7 grandchildren. I appreciate your support in the past and ask for your vote in this year's town election. Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Jonathan Margolis, who will give his opening statement. Jonathan, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ernie. And thank you to the people who are sponsoring this event today, and to all of you out there who have taken the time to watch. I usually say to people who ask me what it is that I do as a library trustee that my primary responsibility is to stay out of the way of our superb staff. And that has been true even while we have been shut for the pandemic for the past more than 2 months now. And I'm afraid that I anticipate that we will continue to have our doors shut until at least the end of June. And that at that point, I'm hoping that with the leadership of our superb director, Sarah Slyman, and her staff, that we will begin to offer some limited services to the public over and above the online services that have been going continuously. And if you have not looked in on the library and viewed the online services that are available to you, I urge that you do it. They are really amazing. They don't make up for being able to browse the stacks, which is what I like to do, but they're very good. Now, a few months ago, before we envisioned the current crisis, we were talking on the library board about a major renovation for the Brookline Village Library. It may seem to some of you as if that just happened, but it was almost 20 years ago that was accomplished. That was finished just before I joined the board in 2005. Now I'm afraid that the upcoming term will be mostly devoted to recovering from the crisis that we are now going through. The town's financial position, the need to furlough our part-time employees, the uncertainty of the future that the coronavirus presents us. Those all mean that it's going to be a tremendous amount of time before we can recover and begin to think about moving forward. But I'm confident that with the help of the public, with a terrific board of trustees that we have, and with our wonderful staff, we will present you with a new library and a renewed library that will be effective in meeting your needs and be, as it has been for a long time, the town's biggest community center. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now would be the point where we will ask some of the questions that have appeared in the chat. And I don't see any at the present time, but I'm going to ask you about with the as you mentioned, the library in Brookline Village having to be improved or repaired or changed in some way. Will this cost the taxpayers any money to do that?
Well, it's pretty difficult to say because at this point, we're really not thinking about it currently. We have been hoping to get on the town's capital improvements list for some years down the road, and we're doing the initial planning toward that. Our idea was that this would be paid for through, in part, our endowment, which has taken a hit, not surprisingly, along with almost everyone's investments, and with getting some funding from the Board of Library Commissioners from the state, and very likely a very vigorous fundraising from the public. Operating funds, I think, would be no part or a small part of any improvement plan.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Not seeing further questions from the audience. Let's conclude this segment on the library trustees, and we will continue on to the race for the school committee. Can we have the next slide? Okay. We have 3 candidates for school committee slots, and there are 3 slots. So this race is also uncontested. One of the candidates, Suzanne Federspiel, is an incumbent. The other 2, Andy Liu and Mariah Nobrega, are running for 2 vacancies on the school committee. We'll hear first from Suzanne Federspiel, then from Andy Liu and Mariah Nobrega. Suzanne, you have up to 3 minutes for an opening statement. Suzanne, wait till we get you up on the screen.
Suzanne, can you turn your video on, please? Thank you.
Ernie?
Yes, go ahead, Suzanne.
Oh,
You.
I'm sorry. Ernie, are you looking for me?
Yes, I am.
I'm so sorry. I'm just to let you know, I was on a phone call because we're interviewing for the interim superintendent. So
Well,
I saw that flashing up and I said, I have to get off this call and go to this one. So I'm so sorry.
Well, no, that's very important. That certainly is.
It is.
Go ahead.
Okay, just tell me, so this is my introduction, my 3 minutes. I'm so
Your
sorry.
opening statement, yes.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So sorry. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Suzanne Federspiel. I am running for re-election for school committee. I was first elected 3 years ago in 2017. I have been a resident of Brookline since 1985. I have 2 adult children. They went through Pierce and then through Brookline High School. I've been an educator for 40 years. 15 of those years I was principal in Boston, and still currently, even though I'm retired, I also do mentoring now for principals and new teachers. So I just want to review, my platform 3 years ago is still pretty much what my core values are. So in that platform, I am striving for excellence and equity in our schools here in Brookline. And the first platform is that teachers have time to have the support and the freedom that they need to teach the whole child. And so to that end, I have had listening sessions with teachers and also other school committee members. I have worked hard with the kindergarten teachers to help them with their scheduling, and worked on social studies and science curriculum meetings in their schedules that our students have, so that we have more of that, especially if it's been cut. And I've worked on project-based learning and trying just to make this all come together. So that's kind of platform 1. Platform 2 is making sure there's racial justice and equity, that they are a central focus in our programming and decision-making. I've been a member of Bridge for 4 years, which is Brookline Racial Justice and Equity organization. I was part of CDICR, our commission, for a year, and I've been very supportive of our Senior Director of Equity. And then for our third platform, I believe work that the school committee is transparent and a democratic participant in our community. And to that end, I have worked very hard to bring budgets closer to at the school level so decisions can be made there. And I am striving hard to really kind of reinvigorate our school site councils and make sure that, again, that power is at the local level. That includes teachers, administrators, and community members. And I've been meeting with school site councils, as have other school committee members with me in the schools. And so I know that certainly now with the pandemic, COVID-19, that we have lots of new challenges. Certainly the budget is going to be a big challenge. I'm sure that will come up in the question period. And certainly remote learning has been a challenge, and been working very hard, late hours, trying to make that happen in the best way we can. So my core values have not changed, even though some of the challenges have changed. And I thank you to our citizens for the opportunity to serve these past 3 years. And I look to serve the next 3 years and ask that everyone please vote on June 9th.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate your comments. Thank you for that. We'll now turn to Andy Liu. And Andy, you have 3 minutes for your statement.
All right. I see now that I'm unmuted and I cannot see myself on the screen, but I will assume that you all can. Oh, now I do see myself. Excellent. So my name is Andy Liu. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 10. And last year I served as the field director for the Yes campaign to rebuild the Driscoll School. I have one son. He's a second grader at Pierce School. And before that, he spent 2 years in the Brookline Early Education Program. So when I decided to run for school committee, my goal was to try to maintain Brookline as a place where teachers and students could to have the freedom to be creative, right, in trying out new ways of teaching and learning. And I thought that the best way to do this would be to be part of a school committee that was trying to shape the district around what I might call the upside down organizational chart, where you have students at the top, teachers and principals supporting them, and central administration supporting the teachers and principals. So that's what I was thinking about back in quieter times. I mean, the job at school committee has suddenly become much, much more challenging than we'd imagined. But my purposes are still the same. Like, regardless of what kind of what model of schooling we're going to be able to offer this fall, my goal would still be to just try to create an environment where teachers and students are able to be creative and to take joy in the work that they're doing.
Okay, Andy, that's fine. That'll make us give us a lot of time here. Now the next we'll hear from Mariah Nobrega, who is also running for school committee. Mariah, there you are.
Nobrega,
Mariah, you're muted.
Am I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Mariah Nobrega. I'm running for election for school committee. I live in Brookline Village. I also grew up in Brookline, attending Beep, Lawrence, and BHS. I work for Northeastern University and its College of Engineering, focusing on project management and tech. My husband and I have a 9th grader at the high school who previously attended Pierce, a 6th grader at Pierce, and a 3-year-old in private daycare. All 3 kids currently receive or previously have received special education services. I've been very involved in the school's communities, serving as the Pierce PTO webmaster for 3 years and the treasurer for 6 years. I was a precinct and school captain for the 2015 override, as well as serving on the townwide organizing committee. This fall, I was also campaign director for the successful Driscoll Override, working closely with an amazing team, including fellow school committee candidate Andy Liu, who you just heard from. Beyond schools-related service, I also serve on the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. I was appointed last year. I've been on town meetings since 2009, and I served on the town's advisory committee from 2015 to 2019, on which I served on the school subcommittee. I've also been petitioner or co-petitioner on multiple warrant articles, including the new community engagement bylaw that was adopted by town meeting in the fall to take effect for the upcoming year. I'm well prepared for service on the school committee because of this varied background. I've been a student and a parent. Our family has accessed services at every level of the system. I'm well versed in town governmental structure and budgeting process. And I have a relatively broad view of the schools and how they fit into larger town government and community needs. I chose to run for school committee this year because I felt that too many recent school committee decisions were not based on facts or good planning that I would like to see. And they've pitted school committees against each other and parents against teachers. With the current crisis, more than ever, we need to focus on working together in good faith and making fact-based decisions transparently, and above all, putting students and the student-teacher relationship first. School committee is not a competitive election this year, but I thank you in advance for your vote.
Thank you, Mariah. We now can turn to the question and answer section, and we have a few questions that have been posed here. And I guess I'd like to start with Mariah about if you're familiar with school councils, and what is your position on the school councils and community participation in Brookline educational policies. Mariah?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. I assume we're talking about school site councils. And for anyone in the audience who doesn't know, school site councils are a legislatively mandated body that brings together the principal, teachers, and parents in a collaborative decision-making body. And I'm incredibly supportive of them. Recently, the school site councils have been somewhat diminished in Brookline, and I think that we have a real opportunity over the next coming years to really reinvigorate that process and their importance in our decision making. And equally so, I would say community participation is critical. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I was one of the two co-petitioners for the community engagement bylaw that was just adopted by the town this past fall. And I think that inclusive, community-based participatory budgeting and other decision-making is critical, really, to maintain the spirit and practice of Brookline government.
Thank you, Mariah. I would like to toss a question over to Andy now. You have not been on the school committee before, so obviously you're looking to make some changes there in how it's functioning. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you would like to see in as a new school committee member?
All right, well, first I'll pick up on what Mariah was talking about the site councils. I think one of the projects that several current and perhaps future school committee members want to undertake is to actually comb through the school's budget and maybe break out the parts that it would make sense to be more schoolhouse based. So actually have the site councils play a role in determining how that money is spent. And I think the way to really empower the site councils is to actually give them some power over the way money is spent at the particular school they represent. And you know, that if you want to broaden the base of governance for the schools, then it's really very hard to make school committee representative of the school community, simply because to serve on school community, you need to make a massive time commitment and you need to be financially pretty well off. So I see the school councils, which are supposed to have teacher representatives, parent representatives, and representatives from the community at large around the school building, as a real opportunity to just bring more people in a way that actually has some power, some real influence over how money is spent, over school policies and over curriculum, but in a way that doesn't require a sort of crushing time commitment and personal wealth.
Thank you, Andy. Question now for Suzanne, this is a very difficult time that we're going through, and there are certainly some extraordinary steps that need to be taken to reopen our schools. Can you discuss a little bit about what those plans might be?
Oh, sure. I won't get it all done in 2 minutes. I can promise you that. But I will tell you that there are many working groups on this right now. So one big bucket is just thinking about whether we will be open completely for everybody in the fall, whether we will be still remote learning, or whether we will be doing some hybrid, in which case we might come for part of the week or part of the day, and another group comes for the other part. And so to that end, there are 3 working task groups with administration and teachers and groups from the schools that are trying to think about that. In addition, there's a remote learning task force, which is meeting Friday mornings, which is mostly getting input from community and families. And so that group is also telling us what is working well now in remote learning and what is it that we need to do better and think about. So those are 4 big groups. And then just today, a letter is going out suggesting an additional 4 additional groups so that we can tap the expertise here in our community. So we have many residents who are actually internationally known experts in this whole field of pandemics and some in remote learning. And so there are going to be an additional number of groups that will be looking to specifically talk about the mental health side of things, the operations, the cleaning side of things, the curriculum side of things, the help for our children with English language that they're learning or special education. And so I have the stop sign, but do look for that letter so that people can participate in one of these task forces.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Uh-huh.
Going to Andy, you are probably, I'm sure that you're aware that we've lost another principal in town. Rumpel School principal has turned in his resignation. There seem to be an awful lot of principals that don't last long in Brookline. Do you have any thoughts on how we might be able to keep our principals?
I think the single most important thing we can do to keep our principals is to hire the right person as a superintendent. So if it's all right, I'll talk about what I'd be looking for in the superintendent, because that's the prerequisite to retaining our principals. I think in thinking about a superintendent, and we are going to be hiring, we hope, a permanent one in the coming year, there's a particular mindset that I'd be looking for and a particular personal quality. As far as the mindset goes, I would just go back to what I said in my opening statement about the upside down organizational chart. I think it's really important that the candidate have internalized that. I think the first 2 questions I would ask to find out whether that is the case are, in your previous job, how did you change your organization to better serve the students? And secondly, how did you change your organization to better serve the teachers? So that's the mindset. As far as personal qualities go, I think I would really value forthrightness and a real commitment to making information available to people who need it. So something that has happened surprisingly often to me when I'm talking to current school committee members is I'll ask about something and the school committee member will say, we don't know what's going on and we can't find out because nobody will tell us, right? So if the school committee can't find out, then the public certainly can't. And I'd be looking for a superintendent who can put an end to this state of affairs.
Thank you, Andy. Mariah, you are familiar with the school town budgeting process and the sharing, budget sharing between the town and the school. How does that work? And is it working satisfactorily from your perspective?
Would you mind repeating the question? Because I was having difficulty with unmuting myself and I got distracted.
Okay. The school town budgeting process is occupied a lot of bandwidth in the town discussion groups and whatever. And by virtue of your previous responsibilities, I know that you know a lot about it. Can you tell us whether that should be revised in any way? What's your thought about that process?
I think that there is room to revise. I think that there's been a lot of decisions that have been made over time that perhaps have distorted some of the choices that we've made going forwards. For example, how we make decisions about whether or not to lease preschool locations and specific other decisions around that have actually come into this because of the way that the calculations are done. And the calculations have also done things like we had, because of the way the calculation, this is very arcane, but because of the way the calculations were done, we were able in past years leading up to the 2015 override to keep up with classroom teachers, but we weren't able to keep up with all the other important staff that really support our students in a well-rounded education. So when we think about what we want our schools to look like and how we want to also ensure that our town departments are also supported, we need to make sure that we're not accidentally distorting the results by the way that the formula is constructed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to toss this back to either Suzanne or Andy. Do you want to respond to anything that you're or make any further comments on what the other candidates have made, or whatever? You can just jump in if you feel like you want to make a comment.
And I might pick up, if I may, on the town school partnership question. One thing that I think, a discussion that I think we should be having in the open right now is the question of whether the town will be willing to contribute anything to the public health or like building safety part of the expenses associated with possibly reopening school buildings in the fall, right? If we're going to contemplate reopening the buildings, then we have to think about some very, very expensive measures that will have to be put in place. Like, who is going to pay for all the PPE that people are going to have to put on and throw away every day? You know, who is going to pay for the very frequent and regular deep cleanings of the buildings that will be necessary? You know, if testing is advanced enough by then, who will be paying for that to help us figure out sort of who ought to be in the buildings and when? It's kind of hard to imagine that the schools using only sort of a by then depleted school budget are going to be able to meet the entire cost all by themselves. But we really need to figure out whether the town is willing to step in and bear part of that cost, keeping in mind the like the great benefits to the town from having the schools open and functioning. I think that's a discussion that needs to happen now so that school committee can concentrate its planning resources efficiently.
Thank you, Andy. Suzanne, you want to add any more to that?
Well, I just agree. You know, we're uncontested here, so we can do that. And, you know, I think it's going to take all of our heads together to make this work, especially around the budget. So, you know, working closely with advisory committee, working closely with the select board, working closely with town meeting, and working, of course, with town hall. We have to figure this out, and it's going to be hard because town revenues are down. There's no doubt about it. And you know, together we have to apply for the FEMAs and the NEMAs, and we've got to work this out. So it's about sharing and talking to each other and figuring out how we're going to make this work at a level that we probably haven't done before, or certainly not in the recent past. And so together we have to work this out.
Okay, thank you. We have, you know, the current status of online learning at the public schools, and assuming we're going to be online in the fall, what do you think the school system needs to do differently this fall? And let me ask Suzanne to respond to that first.
Sure. So I first want to say thank you to the teachers for all the hard work they're doing. You know, we have never done this before, so we've had to turn it around quickly. And there certainly have been some bumps at the start, and we are continuing to learn. So we're continuing to we just had a huge survey that went out. We had at least a 25% return rate from families telling us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. I think one of the big challenges is having some consistency in experiences that our students are having. And so we just recently sent out our learning expectations, but really understanding what that means. What does a second grader need to know by the end of second grade? And how do we make sure that all second graders have had common experiences so that when they go to third grade, they are as ready as they can be, knowing that we're going to have to do some reviewing and even reteaching of some of those concepts. But that's one of the big challenges. We've had a challenge in making sure that all students have access to online learning. And so we also need to remember that remote learning is not just online learning, but it's also virtual learning at home. And so we need to make sure that children have access to materials and to computers and internet and all that they're going to need, also books, all materials that they will need, and that is, again, easily accessible by all our students. And we have to continually ask ourselves, what are the families telling us and what are our students learning, and where are the holes, especially around English learners, special education students, some of our MEDCO students perhaps. And so everybody has to work together to make this work.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to take a look at, do you want to consider this, the online learning and where we're going in the fall as we move into there? If you have
Sure. So the question was about what I think we ought to be doing differently. I think right now, maybe the most important thing that a lot of kids need from the schools is like live real-time interaction with their teachers. And that is an area where there have been these enormous disparities in the experiences of kids, even at the same grade level. So, an example close to home, a second grader on my street who I know very well has been getting 280 minutes of like direct, live, real-time instruction from his teacher every week. And he's one of the very lucky ones. Like our neighbor's son is also a second grader, and he's been getting less than 60 minutes a week. And that these disparities have persisted through 2 months since the schools have closed is very puzzling to a lot of people. I don't think we've gotten a satisfying explanation so far of why this is happening and why it's continuing. And I think that these disparities need to be repaired. Thank you.
Mariah, do you see things that should be done differently in the fall, given our current situation?
Yeah, no, I agree exactly with what Andy and Suzanne said about having greater consistency and access to adults. And I hope that we'll be in a better position to use all of the adults that are working for the schools, including the paraprofessionals, more effectively in the fall. And I think it'll be helpful. I'm going to expand on this question a little bit. You know, we don't know if we're going to be doing fully online learning or hybrid learning or whatever it's going to be in the fall, but if we can set some sort of expectations around if we're going to be doing some sort of hybrid, how can we do it in a way that's much more plannable for families? How can we try and mitigate rather than trying to bring all the kids back and then having to pull everybody out, how can we do some sort of hybrid that brings them in the least risky scenarios, such as doing some sort of, outdoor science activity together, rather than trying to bring all the kids in and then having to pull them back out. So I'm interested in exploring what we can do to really support families on that front.
Thank you. Okay, I do not see, let me just check here. Okay. There's a question here. What does the school committee, what's the oversight school committee exercises with mid-level curriculum administrators? Mariah, this can be either what they do or what you wish they could do.
Um, well, I'm gonna answer that question of the school committee is really principally, has oversight on the superintendent, right? And there's a hierarchy here. And so what the superintendent can do is hopefully we're going to hire, or what the school committee can do is hopefully we'll have a really great superintendent hire who we can work really well with to interface not only with the curriculum coordinators, but all the way through the school system.
All right, thank you. Andy, Suzanne, you've indicated you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, if I could. So Mariah's right. We hire the superintendent. The superintendent is over all the folks. But just to let people know that in curriculum subcommittee and in the whole school committee, we often will have some mid-level curriculum coordinator, I guess that's what people are calling them in this case, or department heads, come and speak to us about particular topics. So for instance, we're doing a math review that's taking a couple of years to do it in K-8. And we have had a number of presentations on the results of that task force and where they're going with it. So although we're not directly in charge of that, we certainly are often brought up to speed on what is happening in a particular curriculum area, or if there's a particular question. For instance, we've had some concerns and questions around literacy, then the coordinator for literacy in K-8 will come and speak to the school committee and answer our questions or present to us. So there is that opportunity. We try to really stay on top of what's going on in the curriculum areas.
Andy, would you like to add anything?
I'm sure I can build a little bit on what Mariah and Suzanne have said. I think school committee definitely has a role to play in sort of knocking heads together. An example I have in mind here is last year, in the majority of the town's kindergarten teachers kind of went public with their disagreement over some things that, some curriculum choices that had been sort of made for them. They felt that some reading standards that had been imposed on kindergartners were sort of not doing a lot for many of their children. And I think that school committee in a case like that has a role in actually bringing this to public notice, giving it a hearing, and bringing people together sort of in a timely way so that these things can be discussed out in the open. I think on that occasion, school committee could have moved faster than it did.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a off-the-wall question here for each of you. There are 9 members of the school committee. Is that the right number to have on the school committee for the town, and recognize that that's going to be, if the number is not right, it probably requires a lot of change above what the town can do or has to go to the legislature. But I'm just wondering if the nine as a school committee member as a board, is that large enough? Mariah, go ahead.
I have two points to make about that. One is organizational behavior tells us what the size is of effective groups, and you don't want to go much more than above 9, given what makes an effective group. On the other hand, I'm not a school committee member yet, but I think we all know, whether you're on school committee or not, that there's a huge amount of work in subcommittee work. And so if you reduce the number of people on school committee, you're really increasing the amount of work per person that needs to be done between subcommittee and liaison roles. So I think we need to be careful about, if we were to consider reducing, what the impact of the burden is on the members who remain.
Actually, my thought was, is it large enough?
Again, organizational behavior says effective group size, right?
Andy,
should not be much larger.
Okay, Andy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, 9 seems about right to me. I think it's important to have it be big enough so that lots of different approaches and skills are represented, right? So right now we have lawyers, we have teachers and former teachers, former principals, we have scientists, public health experts, actually. I'm pluralizing, there's often just one of these, but And if I'm on, then there will be 2 scientists. I think 9 is a good number in order to have sort of all these skills represented.
Okay. Suzanne, as an experienced person
Yeah.
on this committee, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose 9 is okay. I think it's a little high. I would have gone for 7 myself, just because, you know, when you're each given 5 minutes and you have 9, you've already spent a lot of time before you've had a round 2 in terms of people's thoughts. But, you know, as Mariah pointed out, there are a lot of subcommittee responsibilities, and it's really helpful to spread that around. I wouldn't go higher than 9. I feel like that's actually a pretty big group when we all get together.
Thank you. Okay, I think this pretty well takes care of all the questions. We've asked all the ones from the that were on the chat, and we can finish up. And we thank you all very much for your contributions, and we wish you all well in your elections. We can now move on to the select board candidates. And for the select board, we have 3 candidates for 2 select board seats. One candidate, Heather Hamilton, is an incumbent. The other candidates are Eric Hyatt and John Von Skoyak. For this segment, each select board candidate will have in turn 3 minutes for an opening statement. We'll then entertain questions submitted on the chat line for the candidates, and I would ask the audience to, key their questions into the chat line and make sure you hit enter at the end so we will be able to see it. And then we will have the question and answer piece, and then there will be a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate, because this is a contested race, and we think it's important for you to have both ends of the conversation. We'll begin the opening statements with Heather Hamilton. Heather, you'll have 3 minutes for your statement. Heather, proceed.
Okay.
Great.
That took a second to unmute. Thanks. Okay. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Heather Hamilton, and I'm running for re-election to the Select Board. I'm a project manager in the transportation practice at BSC Group, a civil engineering firm in Boston. Previously, I worked at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation for 7 years. I have a master's in transportation policy and another master's in public administration. I choose to live in Brookline for a number of reasons. It is incredibly walkable. It is charmingly historic. There is a great community activism and engagement, and the businesses are some of my favorite places to frequent. I'm committed to sustainability, fiscal responsibility, quality public education, and making Brookline affordable for all. Over the past 3 years, I have demonstrated these values in a number of initiatives. I have co-sponsored numerous warrant articles that help to address our response to climate change. I've organized and led innovative transportation pilots. I've co-chaired the campaign for Driscoll, and I'm leading a committee to build more senior affordable housing in Brookline Village. Over the next 3 years, I would like to finish the work I started on the Land Bank Study Committee to recommend that we put the Community Preservation Act, otherwise known as the CPA, back before the voters in order to raise funds for open space, preservation, and affordable housing. I want to experiment with new transportation pilots that put moving people first, not single occupant vehicles. I would like to continue to help recruit more diverse points of view for boards and commissions, and especially town meeting, who ultimately decide many of our community's values and where we allocate our precious dollars. We are in the midst of a real budget crisis. The town took the action to furlough some employees to balance the budget for fiscal year 20, but severe cuts are looming for fiscal years 21 and probably 22. We do not yet know by how much our revenues will decrease and when life will return to normal, if ever. I'm committed to making this process as transparent, as collegial, and as equitable as possible. I'm asking for your vote this townwide election season. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. That was concise. Next, we have Eric Hyatt, candidate for select board, who has 3 minutes for his statement. Eric, as soon as you come on the line and we can see you and you're unmuted, you can go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, Ernie, Lee, Catherine, and Sue, and especially Betsy DeWitt for everything that you're doing to keep democracy going during this crisis. I also want to thank Arthur Conquest and the Town Meeting Members Association for hosting this event. It's super, super important. I serve on the board of Brookline Interactive Group, so I also want to thank BIG for doing everything that they've been doing to continue promoting democracy during this bizarre and kind of terrifying time. A little bit about me. I'm a Brookline native. I grew up on Mason Terrace. I went to Driscoll, Brookline High School. I was a member of School Within a School, and I went on to study at Harvard and MIT. I worked for 25 years as a global business development executive at Microsoft, Experian, Deutsche Bank. My expertise in those companies was in negotiating contracts, and a lot of the contracts that I negotiated were quite complex and up to about $1 billion in size. So I do have experience negotiating contracts about 3 times the size of Brookline's budget. For the past 12 years, I returned back to Brookline in 2008. And for the past 12 years, I have worked as a professional Japanese translator, a writer, and a writing teacher. I have been deeply involved in public service in Brookline. I was an ESL teacher at the Brookline Library. I mentioned serving on the board of Brookline Interactive Group, and I'm fortunate enough to co-teach with my high school English teacher, Abby Erdman, a class called Telling Your Story, which is a memoir writing group for women, mothers who live in public housing in Brookline. Let's see, the COVID pandemic, obviously, we wouldn't be here in this bizarre format were it not for this terrible pandemic, which is a threat to our entire way of life in Brookline. The job of the select board during a pandemic is to find resources and to help us safely navigate the pandemic. I was really appreciated some of Andy Liu's comments about the schools regarding costs and school safety. That's the select board's job to try to support the school system any way we can as they navigate this incredibly complex crisis. I run a small business that helps Japanese companies enter the U.S. market, and I'm very concerned about the small business community in Brookline. Again, the select board's job is to support the small business community. Finally, the select board's job is to support inclusion. And during a pandemic like this, we've really, I don't know how to put it, but we've seen a crisis of quality of our community, especially low-income residents, senior citizens, and people of color have been disproportionately impacted by this terrible pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate those comments. And now we will turn to John Von Skoyak, who is the 3rd candidate for select board. John, as soon as you come on the screen and are unmuted, you may begin your 3 minutes.
All right.
Thank
you very much. Thank you to the League. Thank you to the Town Meeting Members Association. And if any of you noticed at the start of this that there was a picture that wasn't me, where up in the top of the screen where it said John Van Skoik, that was Barbara. And the explanation is we had to do some fine tuning at the last minute and I moved to her computer. But since you got a quick glimpse of her, I'll start there. Barbara and I have been residents of Precinct 13 since 1983. And I have been, my career as a journalist began in Brookline back in 1975. And the things that really matter to me include that career in journalism, but more importantly, my family. We raised 2 children, Ellen and Robert. They went to the Heath School, they went to Brookline High School, they got a terrific education. As I said, we've been in the same neighborhood since 1983 and we love it. And we know that people all over Brookline love this town and love their neighborhoods. And that is one of the things that got me involved in town politics very early on. I've been a town meeting member for 30 years or so. I've also served on the advisory committee twice, once as chair. I've been a volunteer, very active in the town with the Brookline Community Mental Health Center, now called the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health, Brookline Adult and Community Education, the Brookline Historical Society that I served both as president at one time and now as treasurer. And so I came to the decision to run for the select board back in January, and I never could have come to that decision if I hadn't had all of those experiences. I never would have felt ready, but I felt ready, and I entered the race. And what happens? This crisis hits, this terrible COVID-19 crisis, and think about all of the things that it has damaged and caused just in the short time. We now have lines stretching a block and more outside the food pantry at St. Paul's Church. Food security is a bigger problem than it's ever been, and we've got to tackle it. We now have Raul Fernandez, and good for him for doing this, having weekly meetings to see how Town Hall can participate in standing up our very, very damaged retail community, including our restaurant community. We didn't have that problem before.
John, I think
I'm down to 30 seconds, so I'll leave it at there, but I'll continue the story as we go along.
okay, very good. Thank you, John.
Sure.
Now I guess we will go to the questions and answers, and we have some up on the board. And let me ask first, John, you first, as we recover budget-wise in the next few years, what goes first? Schools, public services? There will be major cuts. What will you fight to save? John, your vast experience in the town?
Sure. And I'm going to fight to save whatever I can. You can't say, should it be schools or should it be town? Because that means that we think that we somehow can do with less police, public safety, fire, that we somehow, are extravagant where libraries are concerned. Every one of these services is important. The question is, how do you go about deciding to deal with a $12 million hole in the budget that was caused by COVID-19, and at the same time respect and balance how all of these very vital services interrelate? So the good news is that there's really good work ongoing right now on that question. Town hall staff is looking at every budget. School department staff is looking throughout their budget. We are weighing things like the CARE Act and whether, for example, the CARE Act is actually going to maybe give us $5 million to apply. Right now, there's a question as to whether it's going to apply other than to unbudgeted COVID-19 related expenses. But we have to let that process work itself out. We have to open up the discussion to as many citizens as possible. We have to weigh what cuts would do to vital services, and then we have to weigh what something like an override approach would do to a lot of taxpayers and rent payers in town who are reeling right now because of loss of income in their families. And then we have to decide. The one thing we don't want to do is preempt all of that information gathering by declaring now the solution is this, or the priority has to be that. We know one priority, and that's public health, and that's going to have to get more money. But we're going to have to take some time to look at everything else in the context of the total of the services of the town.
Thank you, John. Eric, you have some ideas as to how our budget will be affected or repaired as a result of the situation we find ourselves in?
Well, I kind of renounced the future on the day that Donald Trump was elected. I thought that I couldn't anymore predict anything because, that was an unpredictable event. And the COVID pandemic is an equally unpredictable event in terms of its duration and its severity and its fiscal impact on our community. But the range is from horrible to worse. It's not going to have a mild impact on Brookline. We have a strong tax base, and that's good, but that's about 71% of our revenues, and that assumes that we're able to hold our property values. I know a lot of homeowners in Brookline who are just hanging on. My mom was such a person, and she made it to the very long end of where she can hang on in Brookline. And eventually she got forced out, even though she owned her home, just the rising costs. So I do not support fixing the budget with overrides. I consider that unless the overrides are very, very thoroughly vetted. I think the BFAC report, the Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee report, has certain advice and wisdom for us. The report came out pre-COVID, but here we are. And I think if we use that methodology to say, well, okay, what is the fiscal impact of these decisions? Vet any new warrant article for its impact. I think those are standard changes that we need to implement no matter what, and start building. In terms of cuts, what I would prioritize, I agree with John. Public health, public safety, they have to come first. We can't live without our public safety. So obviously that's not even on the table. The real question as a select board member is what new sources of funding can I identify, bring into Brookline, such as federal and state funding. We have to go to the mat for Brookline, prove to everyone we're not just a rich town, and try to get some real support before we go asking our own taxpayers to raise their taxes.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Heather, what do you think about the budgetary impacts of what happens after COVID?
I think it's important to understand where our dollars traditionally go. So if you look at our budget in normal times, our revenue is primarily spent on the schools. It accounts for, I think, 59%. Once you account for the fact that we maintain their school buildings and whatnot, and some of our building staff work on school projects. There are also state mandates that we don't have the luxury of saying we don't feel like complying when it comes to education. So I was not surprised to see the dollar values of the current budget gap for the schools and also the town. I would love to preserve public health and public safety, and I think that that is absolutely necessary. But a lot of our decisions are going to be made for us in with regard to what is mandated per state law when it comes to public education. I have shown that I fight just as hard to get a new sustainability coordinator funded, as well as working on a couple of the overrides. I agree with Eric. Overrides should be a very last resort and should be primarily used for debt exclusion projects. I also want to bring up one of the recommendations that the BFAC report said, which was to have more frequent and more stakeholders at the table for the town school partnership. We need to do it not just twice a year, but probably every other week as we go forward into this uncharted territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, you are all aware of the Brookline reputation, if you will, and recent court cases regarding white supremacy and that whole general topic. Question is on the table is, when will Brookline honestly address the disease of white supremacy? And I will let you answer that in any way that you feel is appropriate. I'll start with Heather.
Sure. Let me just make sure that I can see Lee. There we go. This is very complicated. There are essentially two parts to this question. There's what we have control over as a town, and then there is the culture of everyone walking on the street. So let me first address what we can do as a town, and as someone who chooses to volunteer to be part of town. I know that we have had a number of warrant articles that try to get at changing this culture. I acknowledge that it does exist. I believe people when they say that they are unfairly targeted whether they are walking down the street by, police, or they are cussed at as they try to bike in one of our bike lanes. I just want to acknowledge that. I think that's important. Our warrant articles have started to kind of right the ship, at least with the organization that we know as a formal town. We need to conduct the racial equity audits of all of the departments to make sure that we know what's going on within our walls and with our employees. That's the crux of a lot of the litigation that has come before the town. What we can do as private citizens is educate ourselves and diversify our circles. Personal circles, the people that you interact with, tend to reflect people who look and think like you. And everyone is guilty of it. So we need to find people who don't necessarily hold beliefs that are almost exactly like ours. And we need to listen, keep an open mind, and hopefully educate those people that have some deeply rooted hatred for people just based on the color of their skin.
Thank you, Heather. Excuse me, Eric. Would you like to address the race conditions that you have observed in Brookline?
Sure, thank you. I aspire to be a white ally to the communities of color here in Brookline. I've been very dismayed at some of the stories that my own students have told. These are Brookline residents, Brookline parents with kids in the Brookline schools, and they've described to me systematic racism throughout our school system, our police department, and other areas of the town, places where they're experiencing racism, exclusion, and other things. More recently, there's been an appalling rise in hatred toward the Asian community here in Brookline. That to me is unacceptable, and it's something we have to deal with. We all have to stand up. Again, I aspire to be a white ally to these communities. As the select board, as a select board member, it would be my job to put inclusion as the top priority, which I do think would change the town's focus a bit. The select board sets the agenda for the town. They make executive decisions for the town. And most importantly, the select board appoints members of committees. A lot of these committees are not yet coming from the diverse enough communities that they need to be coming from. We need to hear the voices of everybody in Brookline, the most marginalized people. So I really am a huge fan of the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. I hope that commission will continue to feel empowered to go out into the community, to seek out new voices, and to bring people in, to become part of the government, to become part of the solution. That's pretty much where I'm coming from on this. Finally, as a select board member, if I had the chance, I would vote to end the town's appeal of the case against firefighter Gerald Alston. The case needs to go away and become part of our history. We need to learn our lessons and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. John, would you wish to comment on the race situation in Brookline?
Yes, very much so. And I'm glad we have a chance to address this question. I think we are working on the problem. I think we're working on it day in and day out. We're working on it in many different places and on many different boards in town. We're working on the issue of, we're trying to get body cameras for the police. And that's important. It's hung up right now on the collective bargaining agreement, but I think we got to work on it, and we have to get those body cameras, and we have to deal with the reality that there is a community, there are many in the community in Brookline who feel profiled when they have encounters with police. And that's a reality, but the work is hard. The work is hard. And an example of other work that we've done, the renaming of the Florida Ruffin Ridley School to Florida Ruffin Ridley. Everybody who participated in that process knows it didn't happen smoothly, and it didn't happen easily, but we got the right result. We got the right result. And we need to get more results like that. We need to, for example, take the idea of Barbara Brown, who did terrific work on the Hidden Brookline project, and turn that into the project that she has envisioned to honor heroes of the fight against racism in Brookline. We did have them historically in our midst, and we have some today in our midst. Let's recognize them. Let's talk about the positive as well as the reality that we all inherited the legacy of slavery. And it's all about overcoming that legacy, and overcoming it begins with seeing it in ourselves, seeing that unconscious bias exists in ourselves, and then moving forward, dealing with one another as human beings, person to person, with respect.
Thank you, John. Okay, the couple of you have mentioned the BFAC recommendations, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit. They made a number of recommendations. I can't remember them all myself, but perhaps you remember one or two that you feel are very strongly that we should keep in mind, especially if there are some that were recommended of the select board, which I believe there were a few. John, do you want to make a response to which BFAC recommendation is
Yes.
important to you?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I think the thing to remember most about BFAC is the big picture. The fact is that BFAC's report caught some of us by surprise. We thought we were kind of, we thought we had this all under control, situation under control. We know where we stand. We know that we have a financially secure community. We know that we're on top of our budget issues. But BFAC uncovered a reality that was not evident in the AAA bond rating. And on the other hand, let's give recognition. Brookline has done pretty well. We do have a AAA bond rating. It's worth preserving if we can, but underneath that AAA bond rating was the reality of a community that was doing sort of patchwork approaches to budgeting, because on a chronic basis, our revenues did not meet the increase in our taxes each year allowed under Prop 2.5, combined with other revenues, did not meet the needs of the budgets that maintained our existing services. So I think most of all, BFAC needs to be recognized for that achievement. The specifics of what they recommended to address it, budget summits, I'd put that way up there. I think communication between the budgeting departments of the town and school was lacking, and coordination in anticipating problems and looking around the bend and seeing them coming. And I think if we can start with taking that budget summits recommendation and work from there, we'll make progress.
Thank you, John. Eric, what do you think about the BFAC? I think you've referenced it a couple of times, but are there specific items you'd like to hear?
Thank you. Yes, there's sort of two things I want to mention. You come from a corporate background originally, so I really like to see the kind of professionalism that BFAC is encouraging Brookline to adopt. I think that for us to make decisions that are rational and professional it's very refreshing. To me, the BFAC report was like a breath of fresh air. Specifically, I guess the two things I would say is requiring town meeting members to have some financial training, I think is good. I think that'll help everybody. I also love the idea of vetting of warrant articles for fiscal impact. I might differ slightly from BFAC in that they feel this should be done by a commission of Brookline residents. And I feel maybe we should professionalize that role at Town Hall and hire kind of a GAO or Government Accountability Office for Brookline. But either way, it would accomplish the same end, which is that when a warrant article is brought forward, its fiscal impact is neutrally considered in a way that it's hard to shoot holes in. And then it may decrease some of the mitigation, the COVID mitigation warrant articles that will no doubt come about may actually increase revenue. But let's look at the complete impact of something in a neutral way before we vote on it. To me, that was just music to my ears. Thank you. I'm going to cede the rest of my time.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, Heather, what do you think? What was your reaction to BFAC?
I think it was incredibly comprehensive, very well done. They took some real risks with some of their recommendations. Throwing out look at yearly or bi-yearly more frequent overrides. I was surprised to see that recommendation. I don't actually know how I feel about that because with each override, we make it a little less affordable for people to move in. But in these times, if we want to plug the hole that we currently have, that is certainly on the table. Not everybody lost their job. So we would have to have a community conversation about whether or not current Brookline residents feel that that is the way to go to prevent possible layoffs of teachers. So I thought that that was bold. I absolutely agree that we need to really look at, in any other time, this would have been so much easier, but we need a dedicated person in the town administrator's office really looking at the financial model and making sure that the town and the school's models are the same and can really talk to one another. There are a lot of inefficiencies. They are using 2 different software systems. One of the other things that I really was pleased to see was a change up of the auditor. I've sat through those presentations. They are long. My eyes glaze over. So at least hearing from someone who can do it differently would at least keep me more engaged. And I will end there.
Thank you, Heather. One of the people in the audience has suggested, Heather, your comment you made earlier in the presentation was a suggestion. They took it as you're wanting to slash Brookline schools, and that's the words that are in the question. And I'm wondering if you know what might have triggered that and what you intended.
So I think because I illustrated that it is not our choice, someone could have interpreted that as if I had the choice, I would do it. That is not, in fact, my value. I'm just pointing out that we don't have complete control over our budget. A lot of these things are dictated through state mandates. So we need to all understand what is dictated through state mandates and figure out what is actually on the table to be cut.
Thank you. Many professionals, there are many professionals other than corporate types. Professionalizing town government, does that mean elevating the MBAs? Do we need more MBAs on the select board? Let me start with Eric. Eric?
I think I've unmuted myself. Good. Hi. Well, I proudly do not hold an MBA. When I say professionalize, I want to be very clear. The difference between an amateur and a professional in anything is who gets paid and who does not. A professional tennis player gets paid to play tennis. An amateur does not. A professional administrator is paid to do their job. An amateur is not. The rest of us who volunteer our time, like that still does not make us professionals at what we do. We become professional when we become paid to do something. That's just the definition of the word. So when I say professionalize, in many, many, many cases, I mean a paid professional at town hall. What that does is take the strain off of our townspeople, the hundreds and hundreds of hours that we put in, and then we come to the end of a commission, and then everyone says, oh, they doubt the good faith. You know what? If you want to have good faith, you put in a neutral party who really has a weak opinion on the topic. I'm furious to see the Cannabis Mitigation Committee, for example, being packed with people who strongly oppose cannabis. Why don't we pack it with people with weak opinions and let them actually like grow their strong opinions out of weak ones, rather than coming in with a strong position and trying to mitigate that. So when, the idea of professionalizing something to me means putting it in town hall. The idea of professionalizing a process just means adopting a process that uses paid professionals. That's all I'm talking about. I respect everyone's work equally, and everyone who's paid to do their job is a professional at that job. I am a professional Japanese translator. I am an amateur teacher of memoir. I also get paid to teach. So, it just depends on the scenario. It's really, really crucial that people not think that I want to corporatize Brookline. On the contrary, I'm a lifelong progressive, and my interest is in the most vulnerable in our community. So I want to be very clear. We can use business techniques, but we need to do things in a spirit of collaboration. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. John, do we need more professionals on the select board?
I can't speak for Heather, but Eric has already spoken for himself, and I know what my background is, and I think maybe that question belongs to another group of 3 people. I'm just a humble BA. I chose journalism as my profession. Quite honestly, there are people to this day who argue whether journalism is a profession. But it taught me something that I think has come in very handy in my many, many years of taking part in Brookline politics and Brookline Town Meeting service and Brookline Advisory Committee service and volunteer service. It taught me that you have to respect every concern, that there is no concern too small, there is no issue that should be off limits. And furthermore, you have to respect that there's always going to be 2 points of view, and probably 3 and probably 4 and probably 5 points of view on most questions. And so I remember those lessons every time I approach a controversial issue that is on the table for Brookline. Something else I learned is, as a town meeting member, is a little bit of humility. Some friends might say humility. I don't associate that with John, but I'll say that I've got a little bit of humility. And part of the reason is the incredible talent and the incredible brain power and the unbelievable resumes that are represented at town meeting. And when I think that in that group of 240 town meeting members, with all of that intelligence, all of that experience, all of that diversity of professional wisdom, that over 100 officials and town meeting members have endorsed me in this contest, it makes me realize, wow, I've taken on something, because I owe it to them to deliver for them what they have delivered for me, and that is trust and performance.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Heather, would you like to respond to anything that you've heard?
Yes. So I kind of interpret this question a little differently. So I'm going to hedge my bets and try to answer 2 questions in this time. So I better get going. I think the question is actually trying to get at, should we be paid city councilors or a mayor? When I hear professional, I hear, do we need to start paying people to represent the people of this town? So I have more opinions about that than I did 3 years ago, having now served. I understand the cost it is to me and my time, and quite frankly, my mental health. It is very difficult to hold a full-time job and do this work. And so when there was an opportunity to get paid some amount of money, that would have allowed me to drop my hours at my professional job, which I guess I am a professional in training around transportation, and that has come in quite handy in some situations in Brookline. So I do respect the professionals that do volunteer their time, but when I look around the room, I don't see a lot of young women who have young children. And the feedback I got when the warrant article didn't pass was, well, I guess I can't run for select board. Drop down at work and make this work. So that it's a trade-off.
Eric, you've mentioned, Heather mentioned the possibility of us going to a city or a town or having professionals run the town. Is that something you would support? Oh, it's going to a town manager. Yeah, go ahead.
Did I get unmuted successfully? Sorry, thank you.
You
guys can hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute and someone was trying to unmute me anyway. So the town of Brookline had a missed opportunity. Last time town meeting met, they had an opportunity to pay the select board members a significantly increased salary. I mean, I really am grateful to Heather Hamilton for her service. And I think that when she does the math, it probably comes out to about $2.44 an hour to serve as a select board. So she is a professional. She is being paid. She's just a highly underpaid professional. Highly, highly underpaid professional. I want to be clear. So the select board salary needs to go way, way, way up, just for the reason that Heather mentioned. Inclusion of more women, more parents, more low-income people. I'm about the lowest income person that can afford to run for select board, and it's still going to be a hardship for me to like not be able to do paid work during those hours. But you know, I respect it. So town meeting had the very opportunity to do just that, to professionalize our select board. No, I do not think we need to become a city in order to do that. I don't think a drastic change is required. I grew up in Brookline. In SWS, we had a town meeting. I was taught that town meeting is a very good, very nice governing structure. I would reduce the size of our town meeting, but that's not select board to agree with them on those changes. So I would support that, a reduction in size of town meeting. Yes, professionalize the role and professionalize further the select board and pay Heather a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. John, you support us moving toward a city?
I'm actually going to address what Eric was discussing, and I'll get to do I support moving towards a city at the end. Because I was one who found some problems with the proposal that was offered at town meeting on paying the select board. And I'll just quickly mention two of them. All of a sudden, we have this idea that the select board works really hard on really important stuff and therefore has to be paid. But we said nothing about the school committee. Schools are 60% of the budget. Believe me, because I have monitored school committee meetings and school finance subcommittee meetings and school negotiations subcommittee meetings and school building committee meetings. No one works harder in this town than the school committee members to bring a proposal to town meeting that offers pay to the select board, but say nothing about the school committee, not to mention the advisory committee, not to mention any number of other committees, just seemed flawed to me. And one of the things you learn from town meeting experience, which I recommend to everyone, by the way, especially if they're thinking about running for select board, is that proposals aren't always well crafted the first time out. And this one needed some work. And Scott and Annie and others have done some work on it. They're bringing it back. They'll bring it back in November. And this time around, guess what? They've added the school committee. And guess what? They have somewhat adjusted the balance between the pay for the chair of the select board and the members of the select board. So an improved proposal might indeed win my vote, but the proposal that was brought to town meeting the first time did not. As far as the charter change and the city form of government goes, I think we've got to let the voters have a chance to decide that, to decide the future of Brookline. And I think it's going to be a very, very interesting discussion, and I haven't made up my mind yet.
Thank you, John. Okay, we are at the end of the segment for the question and answer segment for the select board. Because this is a contested race, I'm asking, I think that the select board candidates should present their final 2-minute argument, and we will start with John.
Thank you, Ernie, and thank you everyone who is in attendance today. My hat's off to you because you're showing the interest, and you are showing up, which, by the way, is something else I have done. If you went back over my 30-year record at town meeting, you would find almost 0 votes that I missed. If you go back over my record of voting in local elections, you will find almost 0 occasions. In fact, I think you might not find any on which I ever missed voting in a local election. I'm a big believer in participation, democratic participation, grassroots participation. And one of the things that I've worried about, and one of the reasons that I spend a lot of time at town hall these days, covering meetings, this meeting, that meeting, every meeting, of course, not at town hall now, but in the virtual town meetings, because I saw a real danger to our local democracy from the lack of information. And I thought more information will excite more participation, and more participation will make us a healthier democracy. And now we're challenged with an election at a time when we're afraid to go outside. We're afraid to show up at the polls. And so I tried to be one of the first and one of the most active in urging people to vote early by mail, to protect their health, but also to protect our democracy. I want to say one more thing, and that is that sometimes those of us who've participated for a long time in this local government, this treasured local government, we lose sight of the fact that without our meaning to, we can become like a club, and we can seem to be a closed circle to people from outside that circle. And I think one of the things that I'd like to change about myself, and maybe if I can change it about myself, I'll change it about our select board to the extent that it applies, is that people no longer view me or view the select board as being uninterested in their concerns, or somehow not open to their participation. Participation is something that I've worked for in my journalism career, and in my town meeting career, and in my advisory committee career, and I want to work for it now as a member of the select board, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, John. Eric, your closing statement? Go ahead. You are muted, apparently.
Am I unmuted now?
There you are. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, thank you. And I can see the hide there. Okay. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, once again, Town Meeting Member Association, and Brookline Interactive Group for making this possible. This election, this time, this pandemic has exposed some really, really systematic inequalities in our community. People of color are underrepresented in our town government. Low-income people are underrepresented in our town government. And in good times, that's merely horrible, but in a pandemic, it's a crisis. It's a crisis where the people most vulnerable in our community are not having their voices heard at a crucial, crucial time. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important in this election to elect somebody who's been listening to those communities, who's going to stand up for them again as an ally, and to help safely navigate this COVID pandemic, which is a threat to our way of life. I don't see it going away anytime. When I ran for office, I didn't expect to be running for office in a pandemic. That was not what I thought. I thought we'd be face to face in a room. I look forward to this moment, and it's bittersweet now. It's bittersweet. We're together. We're keeping democracy going, but we're doing it with technology and without being face to face. So yeah, if I'm on the select board, I will aggressively try to bring in federal and state money to Brookline in every way, shape, and form to make sure that we don't have to do things like raise taxes and create more exclusion. I will stack the committees with people as diverse as humanly possible, diverse of viewpoint, people who hold weakly held positions and want to form strong ones with their neighbors working together. That's what I'm looking to do as a select board member. I think the select board has a huge role to play in helping find resources for our schools, our small businesses, and to promote inclusion. Thank you again.
Thank you, Eric. Now we'll hear from Heather Hamilton for her closing statement.
Sure. Democracy is not a spectator sport. So I just want to illustrate how I got involved. Like 6 years ago now. I ran into a town meeting member who discovered I lived in Brookline and had the conversation, you should think about running for town meeting. And I said, what's town meeting? That conversation, I think, takes place in some sort of form with almost everybody who gets recruited to town meeting. So I'm using this opportunity to try to recruit anyone listening or watching, maybe not this year, but definitely think about in future years about running. Within a few months of running, I won by 3 votes, which is actually not unusual because voter turnout is not the highest in local elections. But I quickly went to town meeting, which is a lot when you've just been elected. It's like 3 nights and they just keep going. And then about a week later, I attended the annual Town Meeting Members Association annual meeting and was suddenly volunteered to run for the position of vice president for the association. So within a matter of months and weeks, I was part of this great organization, and I will never forget that it's where I got my start. So I just want to thank the league. I want to thank the Town Meeting Members Association and BIG, and really anyone who's listening. I've really enjoyed these past 3 years. I really hope I get to continue. So I would enjoy your vote this season.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you to all of the select board candidates and indeed to candidates for all of the offices participating in the forum this afternoon. And thank you to all attending this forum. This concludes the question and answer part of the program, and I now turn you back to Arthur Wellington Conquest III for some final comments. Arthur. Arthur? Oh,
Hear me? Sorry, can you hear me?
yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, just a few, one housekeeping chore. Eric, can you please just email me your email address, Eric Hyatt?
I'm sure he can.
Okay, and my email address is awcii@yahoo.com. Thank you. Again, I want to thank all of the participants for their time and work in making this endeavor a success. I wish all of the candidates good luck with the offices you are seeking to be elected to, and to people in the viewing audience. Let me remind you to vote at the polling stations in your precinct on June 9th. You can also vote by mail if you so wish. Now I'd like to turn things back over to Betsy DeWitt for her closing statements. Thank you very much. We've got to get Betsy in there. Okay, there we go.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm looking for myself. Well, I want to thank all the candidates who have given us much to think about on the challenging issues facing the town at this time. I'm glad we had this opportunity. I'm sorry it couldn't be in person, but I think we have had a very interesting set of discussions, and I hope it helps people who are deciding how to vote to decide. And in particular, I hope it encourages everybody to vote. Now, having said that, the League's Voter's Guide will be in your tab tomorrow. And the good news is it has all the information you need about the changes in polling places. There are several different ones. The hours have been changed from early in the morning to open at noon and close at 8 p.m. And voting by mail is explained in detail on the back page of the Voter's Guide. So make sure you find it and keep it. And then in the middle of the guide, you will find biographies and other information about all the candidates. And then finally, I want to repeat the request from the town to invite people to be poll workers. You have to contact the town clerk's office and you have to fill out an application because a poll worker is technically a town employee and therefore has to go through a certain process, which may take a day or so to complete. But poll workers are urgently needed in order for us to have open polling stations. Then I thank everyone who has participated. I thank the people behind the scenes who kept us running, and thank you all who joined us in the audience. And we will see you, I hope, well, sometime soon, but not right away.